Please note that in this show, you may hear graphic descriptions or language that may not be appropriate for everyone. Listener discretion advised. Welcome to Parentless Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Relaford. On the show, we're going to be speaking with others who have experienced the loss of one or both of their parents or their parental figures. As we heard in episode 12 with Louisa Velarde, being parentless is like an island, and I don't know how to swim. Thank you for being my life jacket. Today I have a treat for you. I sit down with my friend Tylor, and the thing about Tylor, this guy's got an infectious laugh. You're about to hear it. So Tylor is a great storyteller, and he's so good that I couldn't share all of it with you here. So I'm so sorry. But once you finish the episode, go ahead and head on over to patreon.com/parentlesspodcast. You will hear the portions that I had to take out. You will hear those for free. And while you're there, if you want to participate in a poll for a project that will be starting shortly, feel free to do so. And that's all I have for you. Take it away, Tylor.
Hi, I'm Tylor Montgomery, and I am a fellow podcaster, and I run a show called the Religion Recovery Show, which I try to put out a couple times a month. And it's just kind of my journey out of kind of losing a big majority of my support system and kind of like restarting that over again in like my own actual truth for once. So that's my world that I live in. Constantly changing and evolving stuff for sure.
Lot to unpack there, Tylor.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining me on Parentless Podcast. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you, Stephanie, for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. You're kind of a unique person to have on the show in the sense, and once your story unravels, you'll tell us, you actually have two living biological parents. And that's why you're unique in the people that I've interviewed so far. But when I talk about the show, I talk about, this is for anyone who's experienced a parental figure loss as well, because we know just because someone's our biological parent, it means really nothing. It's kind of more so in who is taking care of us. Exactly. So let's just go on and start. So tell me, Tylor, who died for you? Who was your person?
Yes. My grandparents. So who I called my Nana and Papa, that were pretty much like my rock, my biggest influence, my biggest source of like inspiration religiously. My whole world revolved around my grandparents, and they were pretty much the ones that helped raise me for the first few years of my life. So to say that they're parental figures is like it's almost an understatement. They were parents to me in that regard, because I don't feel like anyone else really did what they did during that time of my life. So for sure. I don't know if that answers.
No, it totally, Matt. Thank you so much for pointing that out. Did you call your grandparents your parents or your grandparents?
I did once, and I was quickly reprimanded by my biological mom, who wasn't really there. She was there, but she was very absent parent going through her own shit. And that was why I didn't really relate with her as my mom. I viewed her more as my sister than I did my mom. And that really pissed her off, which would piss off any mom, rightfully. But yes, she was extremely pissed that I just referred to her as my sister and my grandfather as my dad. And my grandpa and my grandma had to tell me, like, even though, we do like to, train you up in the things of God and everything, that does not mean though that we could ever replace your mom. Your mom is important and stuff, but your mom is going through a lot of stuff. And that was pretty much like the answer I was given. And since she's not there, that's why we're here, kind of thing. And, it was even a weirder element of it, though, is that my grandparents adopted my mom along with my uncle, too. So it was a weird, like, they weren't even like biologically at all in our whole gene pool whatsoever. So it was like, whoa, that's trippy looking back at it, but crazy.
Now, was that something that you always knew, that your mom was adopted and your uncle, or when did you find that out?
I found out when I was probably like 10 or 11. I think around then, that's when I think I found out. And that's like my whole life at that point lived with people that are not even biologically related to me, and I had no clue. But it's, and I don't want to downplay it, like adopted parents and shit, but like at the same point, like, that's a long time growing up not knowing that, at least in my opinion, as a kid, especially like when, they're giving me family history lessons and all this other shit too. Like it was very confusing to say the least.
I imagine. And you said at 10 or 11 was when you found this out. So tell me, when did your grandparents die?
They died when I was in Bible college. I think it was in my sophomore year of Bible college. And by then, not only were my grandparents like parental figures to me, they were in essence like kind of where I got my marching orders in a lot of ways on religion and God, was through their influence. And I was heavily, heavily influenced and would go back every single year and spend like, 2 or 3 months with them at a time back in Bakersfield. And, those were like some of the best times of my life. So I don't want to make it look like I was going through some horrific indoctrination shit. No, they were just my grandparents, and they were, pretty much like my parental figures that I would go to about everything. They were the only people I felt like I can actually be honest with, and accept everything about my sexuality, of course, but everything else up until that point, I felt like I could talk with them about. And I felt like the older I got and the more distancing that happened since they passed away, I've kind of seen in light of who they really are, which is a lot different than the people that I thought.
What an experience for you. Man, I'm just taking that in here.
It's weird. It's weird to say the least. Like in terms of like a weird little thing, my grandpa's entire background, like I know nothing about him. And it's intentional that I know nothing about him because I dead ass believe that my grandpa was working on some shit with the government back in the day. And I'm not just saying that. Like, it's really weird. We found this old photo when we were going through their stuff after they passed away when I was in college. And we found like this like picture of my grandpa when he said he served in the Korean War up in Alaska. And before that was like Russian occupied territory shit. And like, there's a picture of my grandpa standing next to like an F-16 before the F-16 came out. And I'm like, what the hell? And I was like, this unmarked like military uniforms and shit. And I'm like, he said he was like a church photographer and shit for all these years, never owned a camera other than just a Polaroid. And I'm like, there's just weird things that you're like, is this whole thing just a cover for something else? Or like, what the fuck? And he like spoke full fluent German too, along with my grandma. And I'm like, so our family joke has been that they are just German Nazi spies that somehow or another got immunity after World War II or some shit. Family like made up lore. I'm not saying that my grandparents were German Nazi spies, but it could have been.
But they were Christian, right?
They were Christian. They were adamantly Christian.
So obviously they can't be Nazi spies. I mean,
well,
we can't say that. We don't know that. We don't know anything for sure.
All I'm saying is that after being a good student of history for years too, like I have seen many people that profess Christianity that have belonged to seemingly unfavorable political movements. So that's all I'm saying.
Yep. I think we can all agree that is definitely
it's weird.
Thing.
Just want to throw that in there.
Yeah. That is so crazy. I think you're going to have a lot of stuff to throw at me. Man. Okay. So
I didn't prep you at all for that. That was completely just on the spot. So thank you for handling the news of my grandparents potentially being German Nazi spies like you did.
A lot of people I don't prep with, actually. Sometimes they send me some information. Sometimes I don't. But I don't generally prefer to talk on the phone. But I do if the person wants. And we had like a longer, like an hour conversation or more. And I'm still looking forward to whatever you have to tell me, because I know you're, again, Nazi spies. You're going to be throwing everything at me. So
absolutely.
Bring it on, Tyler.
Good morning. Good
afternoon. Hello. Okay, so we're going to unpack some of the other stuff that you told us before, but not right now. So let's go back to your grandparents. So who died first, your grandma or your grandpa?
It was my grandpa that passed away first, and he passed away in May. And I remember it because it was about like 3 days before his birthday. And so that was like really shocking because we thought of all people that was going to pass away first, it was going to be my grandma because she was like 8 years older than my grandpa was. And so my grandparents, though, like had such a close relationship. I mean, they were married for 43 years. And I knew deep down that as soon as my grandpa passed, my grandma was probably not far like beyond that. And that's exactly what happened about a month and a half later too. So she did not last that long after my grandpa did. And it was bad. I mean, to say the least, it was really rough because I wasn't there for either one of them. And that was especially rough because I had my morals, so to speak, that I got from them as being the biggest thing that separated me from them. And that was pretty much like the reason what I'm saying with that is that they instilled in me, do not miss church. Don't miss ministry. You need to dive in deep into ministry. If you're going to do it, give it your whole heart, your full effort, that kind of thing. And they were well convinced that I should be in ministry, that I need to be going on these mission trip kind of things. And that's where I was at the moment when my grandma passed away. When my grandpa passed away, I was in my dorm room. And when I heard that, I realized like right at that moment that earlier that night, I got a phone call from him. And I intentionally didn't answer it. And that's still something that, to be honest, that's still something that kind of fucks with my brain, is that what would that have conversation been like? I don't know. But I would have liked to at least have some kind of moment with him looking back, even if it wasn't that he knew everything about me as I am today. Maybe even something like that of hinting at that or something might have been beneficial for my mental stability later. I don't know. But he called me earlier and I was out with some friends, just getting back from doing like canvassing and stuff, which was like passing out leaflets, inviting people to church. And all of that, if you remember any of that. and that was some old school shit. And he ended up giving me a call, left me like a voicemail to call him back. And he literally passed away about an hour after that.
Oh, wow. And before that time that he tried to call you, were you guys in contact or had it been a while that you had talked?
Yeah, it was like we would have like at least like twice a month where we would talk probably for about an hour. And we would like to like retain our conversations and stuff with each other. Even though I couldn't tell him all the shit that I was actually up to, I at least was able to tell him a little bit more about the nice facade of Bible college and, the Baptist world and all of that stuff. And he had 26,000 opinions, as do I do. Even though we aren't blood related, I definitely inherited some stuff from him. So, to say the least.
Yeah, that can't be knocked. I mean, there are things that are just in you inherently from your biological parents, but of course our environment is a huge thing.
Yeah. And I don't know. It was just weird. Like after he passed away, it was almost just like my whole world was put in a funk because this was the biggest figure to me in my life. I was closer to my grandpa than I was my grandma. And my grandpa was my everything. He was my storyteller. He was the person that brought like life into seemingly innocuous things like fishing and, all of these things like, playing canasta and shit like that, like eating grapefruits in the morning. It was little things like I was talking with my partner Xavier about this the other day. I was just remembering, I'm like, every morning my grandpa was just such a character. Like he lived in this like almost bigger than could be imagined world in his own mind. But it was like his own perfect little mess. So like he was disorganized as hell, but was trying to learn Greek. He was trying to do everything, which is like me. And I feel that. I'm like, this guy is totally me. And he just is like driven to start all of these different projects, but never fucking finish one of them, and would have a drawer full of stuff that he bought for my grandma because he's a gift giver. And, that's who I am. at my core. Like, I'm a gift giving kind of person, and I get that. I feel like from that environment, like you're saying, of that kind of person. And even though like there was a lot of stark disagreements I would have with him now, fuck, I would I give anything though just to hear some advice from my grandpa on some stuff though over the years after he's passed. I do miss him. Even now, I still do.
I would like to know if you could tell your grandpa anything, what would you tell him today?
Ooh, that was a question I wasn't expecting. Jeez. It feels weird that I'm put on the spot too. You know what I mean? I'm like, not for you, but I'm like in my own mind, I'm on the spot because I'm like, fuck, if I could redo that moment, what would I tell him? I think I would tell him that the person that you knew for so many years isn't who I really am on the inside. There's a part of me that you don't know about. And I feel that I would want, just as a young gay man, that I would want some kind of like, you're okay in my book kind of thing from him. And that's what, like, I don't know like how to phrase that or like what, but that's what I would want to hear from someone as religious as my grandpa was, to be like, you know, my grandpa would always talk in this voice, and I can do a pretty good impersonation of the guy too, but he's like, you know, pal, one of the things that I appreciate the most about the Bible is this and this. And that's just kind of how he would talk, very emphatic. And I would love that same amount of emphasis and care and attention put towards me in that regard, on who I am today as an out person, who I am today as a deconstructing person of faith, who I am today. Like, I don't know exactly how I would phrase that, but I would just be like, you know, Papa, can you at least give me a chance to have coffee with you and let me show you how actually happy I am, and not this manufactured world of happiness that I showed you the last time, because I can actually sleep well at night, probably for the first time, and probably since he's talked to me last. So I don't know. I'm trying not to cry too, but like that's probably what I would say along those lines.
That was very nice.
It's clumsy, but I couldn't think of a better way of saying it, you know?
Yeah. And you chose not to have the questions ahead of time. And I really like that, because you get a better response. And I wonder what do you think his response would have been to that? Is that too?
I feel like the response would still be dismissive, to be honest. And it just depends. It's like, did he suddenly get universal consciousness of how life really works after he died? I don't know, but I would hope that there would be some kind of an acceptance, regardless of who I love or what I love and why I love it, to not be the deciding factor of him accepting me. I would want to believe that. But I've seen how he acted with my biological mom, and I saw that there was no room for grace there with her either. And that's one of the hardest things, is that as much as I would want to talk to him, it would be one of those things that might be detrimental to me entirely, because it would pretty much like reopen that wound again that I tried so hard to close after he passed. And especially with him and my grandma, like, you know, being some of the first people that held me in the hospital in the 90s is something, I guess, but I don't know. That's a tough one though. Like, I don't know if he would accept me, to be completely honest. And that's kind of like the scary part of it, of trying to even go there, is like, I've never even thought about that. Like, you've blown my mind several times in the last like 10 minutes on questions that I haven't thought about. They probably saw me in the best light that they could have. And that's the thing, like, that they really probably did see me in the best light that they could have, and been happiest seeing me there than they probably would now. But was I happy then? No, like, not at all. Not remotely happy.
for me, I know that if my dad died when I was very young, and I know if he would have lived, my life would have been completely different. And we can, guess that might be the same for some people. But how do you feel? Like if your grandparent and, if your grandpa had lived, to this day, would you still be able to be yourself and who you are today?
I would say yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it might have to be me cutting people off, but it's one of those things that I've realized now after coming out when I was 28, which was last year. I can't believe it felt like 10 years ago now after this last year. But after coming out, I don't want to ever go back to that situation of me having to hide shit about myself. And once you've lived in that openness and that freedom, why would I ever want to go back into the closet of trying to hide from my family on this shit? And that's my thing. I'm like, at the end of the day, not to be disrespectful at all to my grandparents' memory, but honestly, fuck what they think at the end of the day. It's ultimately what is going to benefit the people that are alive now. And that's what I love so much about like my new perspective on this shit is that it was weird to hear me say it about a year ago after I came out. I said something very similar to that though. And it's weird that you brought that up because I was like, would I have come out if my grandparents were here? That kind of thing. Would I have been as bold as I was and said the things I would have said? And I have to look back and say, fuck it, I have to. Because it's truth is truth regardless of how you receive it. And it's like their reception of my truth should not limit my expression of it. And I don't know if that's a good way of saying it, but I don't really give a fuck at the end of the day. It's like if they appreciated it or not, I'm sure I've said multiple times to my partner, I'm sure I'm making them turn over in their grave daily on the shit that I posted on social media alone. I can't imagine seeing, if they had a window into seeing like how some Christian theology is like that, the great cloud of witnesses is viewing everything you're doing. I hope to God not, because I'm sure I would be freaking them the fuck out on a regular basis. And I would prefer not to do that to my dead grandparents.
Exactly. That is totally something that I like to talk about with people. And for you specifically, I mean, you talked about Bible college. So with your views from there and your views from now, do you, like you just mentioned, I mean, you may not believe that your grandparents are looking down on you today.
Yeah, are you asking like?
I guess my question is, do you feel like they're looking down on you today? But you just answered that in your.
Oh yeah,
I don't think so. Not.
I hope not. I feel like that's the safest answer. Is like I hope not. Being like a student though of like studying the metaphysical shit and the spiritual shit in religion. Is there a possibility? Sure. I mean, I'm never going to rule it out, but I really hope to God not. And even though like the more and more I'm studying this shit, the less and less I believe in the end and afterlife just in general, as I really don't right now. I'm just kind of like, I don't know, but I've seen some weird shit. Like I had a psychic before try to tell me that my grandpa was like in my apartment. Okay. Okay, now that's creepy, right? But like,
yes.
I was thinking too, I'm like, well, maybe my grandpa was into some gay shit. I don't know. And I'm just kidding. I'm messing. But in all seriousness though, like there was a psychic that legit came over to my house, to my apartment here, and told me that if I see pennies laying around, I shit you not, this is real, okay? If you don't believe me about psychics, like let me tell you, most psychics are a complete load of crock, in my opinion, are just full of shit. But this one here was really interesting because it was so specific, but still wrong, but still very specific. And it was like, if you see copper pennies, and I'm like, what other kind of pennies? Like wooden pennies? But if there are copper pennies lying around or dimes lying around in your house, which happens all the time to me because I'm disorganized as hell, then that's your grandpa leaving little coins behind because that was one of his songs that he liked, Pennies from Heaven, which is actually true. That was the weird part. My grandpa did like that song a lot, but I feel like that's a lot of old people kind of like that song. I even kind of like the song, but I'm like, I don't think that's like justification of saying my dead grandfather is living in my apartment watching what I'm doing. with my partner. That's creepy to me. But she told me that he was standing over my shoulder and he was smiling, that he was happy. And I'm like, well, that's nice, but I don't know if it's true, but I hope he's happy.
Are you sure? Do you have the right papa there?
That's what I'm wondering. I'm like, what papa are you talking about? Is this a bear kind of grandpa you're talking about? Or are you talking about my grandpa? I don't know. But I don't know.
I've never been to a medium, and I don't know that I will. I don't know. There's, you never know.
It's an experience you got to at least try once, because it'll fuck with you. At least for like a day or two, you'll be like, is that real? And there's a good chance that it probably isn't. And it's just your mind coming up with shit, trying to believe it. That's what I feel it is, in my opinion.
Hey there, welcome in. For Mother's Day and Father's Day of 2021, I would love to put a project together, but to do that, I will need your help. If you'd like to participate, here's what you can do. Call 623-396-6069 and leave a voicemail. It can be anonymous. And look, I am a mom, I work, and I just put in my resignation letter as my son's first grade teacher. So no worries, I will not be answering your call. All right, so if you've picked up the phone and called the number, the next step, obviously, is to leave that voicemail you've always been wanting to leave. Parentless Podcast was born out of the idea that we all have questions or something we'd like to tell our parent if we could just pick up the phone and call them one more time. Now, I can't promise that they'll get this message, but you can at least send a voicemail out to the universe for your dead or estranged parent. I believe this will be a powerful display of all of the feelings, questions, comments, I'm sorries, thank yous, and everything that we might ever wish that we could tell them. If this appeals to you, please call or share with a friend that might find this helpful. Today's podcast spotlight falls on Grief Out Loud, a podcast by Dougie Center. What I like about Grief Out Loud is that it's kind of a mixed bag of things. You're going to have grief stories from widows, grief stories from children who've lost one or two parents, grief stories from parents who've lost children. So many grief stories, and this podcast has something for everybody. You can find Grief Out Loud on any major podcast platform. This is hosted by Gianna DeCristofaro, and she works with it's produced by the Dougie Center for Grieving Children and Families in Portland, Oregon. The Dougie Center has lots of resources that you can find. That website is www.dougy.org. If you have a favorite grief-related podcast that you want to be in the spotlight, please let me know. I would love to share it with everybody else. Thanks.
So your weird experiences that you've had, do you equate them to be around your grandma or your grandpa, or just other stuff? Okay, so tell me those.
Oh yeah. So specifically, there's like a constant two things that constantly keep happening. And that was redundant, but my mom and my brother specifically can attest to this, which is Cody, my little brother. And he's told me several times, and shown me pictures too, several different times, of hummingbirds specifically out of the blue. And this is weird because I've noticed too that this is a common thing, is that after a loved one passes away, is that there is like a certain item or an animal or an object that seems to be identifiable in the mind as being related to this person. And whenever you notice that thing, it seems like the mind instantly goes to, this must be the person. And that's what I was thinking for a while, until it just kept happening in the weirdest places. Like after a while, you just start thinking like, is it just mere coincidence anymore? Or is this shit like actually going on? We pulled up to a random gas station that was legit abandoned. They had a picture on the gas pump that was carved in, etched in as a hummingbird. Of all the fucking things, in the weirdest places, like weird murals we've never seen before that just keep popping up in weird places just about hummingbirds and shit. My mom, she has, a couple tattoos of hummingbirds too, because in where my family lives in New Mexico, there are no hummingbirds around there, like whatsoever. I've lived there. There are none around there, especially in her part of town. Not at all. No flowers, nothing like that. It's literally just a desert. And it's northern New Mexico. There ain't much there. And there is just a freakish amount of like blue jays, and which was the symbol for my grandpa, and hummingbirds, which was a symbol for my grandma. And my grandparents constantly like are trying to send my mom some kind of sign she thinks about them being there. And my mom's had stuff too, where the picture of my grandparents specifically, this thing weighs about 45 pounds. Okay. And it's hung up there on like several screws and has a wire and all that shit too. This thing legit moved itself off of the picture about an inch and then fell straight down with nothing broken. I don't know how the fuck that happens. That's weird to me. And my mom is like saying weird shit. Like she's heard things and seen things. And here's a weird one for you. That's one that has happened in that house too. It's kind of around my grandparents, but I don't know if that's who it is. But in my little sister's room, this sounds like something off of Paranormal Activity, but it is real. And we have several people that can vouch for this shit. My little sister was in her room in the middle of the night and was talking to someone. Don't know who. Little kids do weird, creepy shit. I get that. But like my mom heard it on the baby monitor, and my little sister was having like a full conversation with another person that was in the room that my mom heard. A different kind of voice. And then to make things even weirder, this happened several different times. And she's also heard 1940s and 50s music, which my grandparents loved so much, like constantly would be playing the big band stuff. That was coming out of her closet one night. So I don't know if that's real or not, but whatever the fuck it is, it's creepy. And it seems to be around my grandparents every time my mom brings it up around my grandparents. And I'm good. I don't know what kind of weird shit my grandparents have with that house, but I don't want anything to do with it.
So does your mom live in their house?
No.
It's just your mom's house. Okay.
Yeah, just my mom's house. Like, which is even weirder. Like, there's no connection to them with that house whatsoever. There's more of a connection to them with our old house on Municipal back in Farmington that we used to have. But no, I don't even fucking understand. It's weird. But I feel like it's one of those things that if you go looking for shit, you're going to find shit. And that's been like a general rule of thumb that I had even when I was a pastor back in the day before I was out. I would tell people there are certain things that you probably shouldn't fuck with, and that's one of them. And I tell people that all the time. Like, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, and I don't necessarily believe all of it either. But does it still mean that I fuck around with that shit? No. I've watched enough A24 films to know better than that. Okay, I know way better to mess with that shit.
Well, that's a lot of creepy stuff to have happen. And you said it, there's other family members that can verify stuff. It's not just your mom saying things. Yep. So.
Oh, I've seen some weirder shit too. Like we need to do like a different. I'll give you another one. I'll give you another weird one. Okay.
Oh, gross. Okay, man. Well, okay. So, but I am, and like you did get some possible signs like from your grandparents. So that's really interesting.
It's weird. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about your grandpa. So tell me either about your grandma or your grandpa, both of them. Is there anything like a smell, sight, taste, sound, anything that when you hear it, smell it, you think of them?
I would say my grandpa, like Old Spice. If I ever smell like I'm talking the original, not this new shit, like the old bottle that looks like a fishing lure. You know what I'm talking about?
No. I only know the new shit.
It looks like a grenade almost. It's about like this big. Okay. And it has like a little sprayer on top, whatever. And they still sell it in the boxes at like the stores and shit. You can see it. Okay. You go to Walmart or Fry's or whatever, and they'll have it there on the top above the shaving areas, like the Stetson type smell, the old school musky, like, okay, Polo Safari. There we go. That's my grandpa to a T, or Kenneth Cole Black. That's it. Like, those are, anytime I smell that, I'm like, I'm in my grandpa's room. I'm in my grandpa's like bathroom. Every time I smell that. With my grandma, it's tea rose. Anything with roses, I smell, it's my grandma. I actually just got a bottle of Bath and Body Works, like it's called Rose, and it's like a shea butter thing. It smells so good, but it's after I put it on, I haven't used it actually a lot, and I know why, because it reminded me a lot of my grandma, like almost too much. Like, it was just like, this smells like my grandma's, like, lotion. And I'm like, I don't know if I like that. Like, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. I'm, like, relaxing on the couch with my partner, and I'm, like, smelling like my grandma. I don't know if I want that. So, if that answers it. But, yeah, there are definitely scents that still hit me that remind me of them a lot. It's weird. For me, roses will do it for some people, but for me, a sermon will do it for me. And why I'm saying that is, like, I was the one who preached at both of their funerals. And so I had a Bible specifically that I would look at that I used for both of them that eventually I had to get rid of because I tossed it because I couldn't look at it anymore. It was too, like, troubling. And I had a lot of their books too. I don't know if this helps too, but understand a little bit of what, like, how I've dealt with it more. But, like, I had a lot of their books because I inherited pretty much everything after they passed away. They cut my mom out of their will, all that stuff, because she got divorced. So that kind of gives me a reason to think that they weren't necessarily the kindest people all the time or the most gracious people all the time either. So I'm not just trying to bash them. You know, I have good reason. But yeah, that's pretty much happened to my mom. She got cut out of everything. And then after that, you know, they pretty much wanted nothing else to do with her in her life anymore. So I don't know. It's they were weird about it for sure. So they gave me a lot of their stuff that they would have given her that just feels weird that I have it. And, like, I shouldn't have it because it should be your daughter's, not mine. And it was that weird thing almost that they, after a certain point when my mom got her life together, it's almost like they kept overstepping as parents when they weren't. Like, when my mom got her life back, it's almost like my grandparents still tried to keep me from following in her footsteps and would try to protect me from things that my mom would do. So they would try to, like, they would actively be doing, like anti-mom things that mom would say or do. If she would be like, oh, I won't give you money, they would give me money for something just to try to earn my loyalty, I believe, after looking at it. And I feel like that's like incredibly manipulative too, based on, like, I was a young guy that was, like, financially strapped all the time, and I still am. So please donate. But but yes, I'm like, I still dealt with that financial struggle back then and everything too. And I felt like they as my parental figures, even though they weren't anymore really, we kind of grew, like I said, like, talking just a couple times a month kind of thing. And the more and more I realized that I was like my mom, the more I realized that I'm not kind of like these people in a lot of ways. And thank God I finally have come to that conclusion much later. But at the time, yeah, I pretty much listened to everything they would say and did whatever they wanted. Because as far as I was concerned, I benefited the most out of it, you know, after they passed. So I had all their books, I had all their shit, I had all their commentaries, I had thousands of dollars worth of Christian shit that I legit put in a laundry basket and wheeled it off to my dumpster in the last, like, 6 to 8 months. Because I felt, in my opinion, that the energy, even in my apartment, was so fucking clouded just by all of their stuff being around me that I just had to get rid of it. It's weird. But
I don't find it so weird because you told me that you came out last year in 2020. What month? Do you remember?
February. So I'm coming up on my
February.
1 year. Yeah.
So right before a pandemic, you came out. So congratulations there.
Thank you.
But
only good thing.
So I mean, you're cooped up in your apartment and you have all of this Christian paraphernalia looking back at you. So I can.
I'm gonna start calling it that. Christian paraphernalia, sir. We found a ton of Christian paraphernalia in your car. Do you care to explain that shit? Sorry, I love that.
No, I can feel though, like it might have just be a cloud hanging over you every time you look at it, for sure.
Yeah.
So you gave the sermon. Is that what you call it? The sermon?
Yeah, like a eulogy
at both of their funerals. Okay, how was that for you?
Weird, and it was weird too because, like, my grandpa got, like, a very patriotic thing and tribute when I knew nothing about what he did, which is another weird thing. Like, that's why I mentioned that earlier too. Like, as a callback, like, that shit about my grandpa being, like, in in like the government and all this shit and like secret stuff. I don't know, but it was very sus when the funeral was going on, is all I'm saying. He got like, maybe that is normal for people that have been vets before, but it just seemed like everyone knew him and not everyone was able to explain how they knew him or how long they knew him or anything else. It was weird because I had so many people afterwards come up to me and say, God really used your grandpa, in my life and helped change my life, which at the time was encouraging. And it just kind of like, looking back though at it, it's almost like you didn't have to come up and tell me that was my grandpa. Like I feel like for me, retroactively speaking on behalf of Montgomery's now, that don't give me credit for shit if you've had an awakening for something or if you've changed your life for something. You can thank yourself for that. And I feel like that's the biggest thing that I wish I would have said probably at that eulogy. But what I said was that, there were so many people that were impacted by him. And, look at his impact. He was a man that lived for God and lived for others. And yeah, that's true. But at the expense of your own family, I don't feel that that's good. At the end of the day, at the expense of losing your daughter, I don't think it's worth it. Is it, and it's the same thing I said pretty much about my grandma too. She was a staunch German, last name was Dirksen, if that gives you any context. She was tough as nails, loved, the black and white milkshakes from, Doors, which was an ice cream parlor in Bakersfield. She knew what she liked and she was very particular. And I got to admit, she's one of the toughest ladies you ever meet and one of the most stubborn people you ever meet. And I feel like I've inherited stubbornness, at least from her, even though we're not biologically related. But yes, my German stubbornness comes from my German grandmother. And that was one of those things that I said, she was stubborn. And a lot of people even agreed with me even then at the funeral. As stubborn as she was, she had a heart of gold. And I said it back then, and because I believed it. But after talking with my mom years later and all of the shit that kind of she had to go through because of their religiosity, it kind of made me eat my words later on about what I said in the eulogy, which is another lesson, like, to anyone listening that may have to ever do that shit or has done it. There's no reason to lie about shit. If you don't know, just don't know and keep it as positive as you can, and that's it. And just move on. Like, write your own eulogy about what you really think they are, maybe after the fact. I don't know. But I wish I would have been a little bit more honest, and I feel like that probably would have helped my mom move forward better. And seeing them buried right next to each other. I haven't gone and visited their grave. I haven't. After they died and in Christian theology, right? What's the point? And they're pretty much going to be resurrected with Jesus someday. That's what I used to think. And I was like, so what's the point of visiting them? I saw them in their last form and that's it. And I'm going to see them in their new body someday. And that was my whole reasoning behind it. And now I just don't see them just because I'm just not a big fan of them. That's it. People that were my parents, at the end of the day, I'm glad that my mom was my mom, though. At the end of the day, throughout all of this shit, I'm glad my mom was my mom because, she became, even though I was parentless, at the end of it, I ended up with my mom somehow again after, being sober and shit like that for a few years for her. So I'm like, I don't know. There's all these weird technicalities, but I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. Well, and so let's clarify. Like we said that your mom really wasn't in the picture. She was, for the longest time, she had her own stuff going on. And so it sounds like from when we talked before, you guys just kind of came together more recently, right?
Yeah, it was definitely more recent. So, and it's nice though now. It's nice. Like for once, not to say our family's ever not going to have drama, but if you know our family, oh yeah, drama. But I actually just found out too recently, which one of the things I talked to you about, like I just found out recently that my biological dad that I never knew ever up until this last year that I've ever heard about is actually alive. I thought the guy was dead, but no, this guy's actually alive and is actually come out as trans, which is even more fucking confusing for me as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I'm like, oh, great. Now I have to be nice to one of my own. That kind of shit. That's how my brain works. And I'm like, it would have been a lot easier if he wasn't. That was just my brain being honest. Like, you know, it'd be a lot easier if he was just some asshole toxic masculinity guy. But that's thrown out the window, obviously. And now a very different person has tried to reach out to me. And I don't give a fuck, to be honest, because I want to try to keep my image of who was my dad as nostalgic and as picturesque and as wrong as possibly my thinking was back then. You know, for all intents and purposes, he was my dad. And I'm okay with a little bit of self-deception on that everything was okay and hunky-dory back then, even on their religious beliefs, to just have that father figure kind of thing, to be honest.
With your grandpa.
Yeah. It's better than saying that it's better to have my grandpa than having that dickhead who took advantage of my mom and stuff before she was even 18. And so that's one of those things that's like, my story is so complicated, but like, you know, if you guys ever want more details or whatever too, I don't mind giving it, but I'm an open book with that shit. It's obviously like I've talked to you about all this shit, but my family's so complicated with shit, you know, like I don't know, Stephanie.
In many different ways that you've already touched on, but give me kind of just a breakdown on how you feel like the loss of both of your grandparents has affected you.
I feel like for my grandpa specifically, that was probably like the biggest thing for me, was losing my grandpa. I don't know necessarily like if I don't know how it hurt me more, or if it, I don't know what the right word for it is. I believe it's hurt, but I feel that it's just kind of a sense of emptiness after they're gone. The biggest thing for me was deleting or keeping their number in my phone. I don't know why, but I found like this is actually a kind of a common thing, but I just didn't know that it was. But I have their number memorized. It's, 3991401. I still do. And, I still have their alternate numbers for both of their cell phones memorized too. As I have full body goosebumps right now too. I remember all of our little dogs' names. I remember all of this shit. Like, all of these things, to be there one day and then not to be existent the next day is so fucking hard for my brain to fathom at times that it tore my brain apart. It tore it apart to a different level that it hasn't felt pain before. And that's why I feel like unless you've gone through that same pain, to sound like an anime character, unless you've gone through that same pain, you really don't remotely understand the emptiness. And I can't imagine other listeners that have lost, their biological family and stuff so quick too. I'm not a victim by any fucking means in comparison to many other people, but losing those people in my life at that time when I had no other support system at the time was really rough. And it was one of those things that I would call my grandpa's phone while it was still on. And I've only told a few people this, so I guess everyone knows now. But I would call my grandpa's phone. I'd call his phone every week, and until it just was disconnected after a while. But I would leave him voicemails and stuff too, just so I could hear his voice again. And it was one of those things of like, I needed some kind of connection still. And after he was gone, it was my church was incredibly non-helpful and incredibly hurtful and incredibly insensitive to this loss. Because of that, me losing my grandparents, I cannot emphasize how important that was for me actually leaving religion. Thank God. Like, in a weird way, it was a good thing that they passed when they passed, because if they wouldn't have, I'm pretty sure I would still be fucking brainwashed as hell right now. And that's like a very morbid thing to realize, but I realize it's all connected. Like consciousness and awareness and all this shit is all connected to even loved ones that we've had in the past that really that no longer benefit us by being there in a weird way. That's not the only reason why people exist. I'm not trying to say that or sound horrible, but the usefulness of their information and what they've brought you in your life has met its full length of term. And this is like the perfect, seemingly horrible time, but this is the right time to where they've had their influence where they need to have it on you and where that influence needs to stop. Like, that's where I feel like death is that equalizer for that in a weird, horrible, poetic way, is that death is that equalizer. It's that evolutionary thing that's rough and horrible and terrible, but it's one of the things that has made me into who I am. So I needed that death in order to bring me life. And I need my death someday to bring other people life, I'm sure, too. To get really complicated really quickly, that's what I think. I don't think I have it all figured out, but that's kind of my recent reasoning on it. Am I crazy? I was actually free to ask questions.
We'll be right back.
If you have a story you'd like to share, please give me a call at 623-396-6069. You can leave a voicemail because I am busy and I will not be answering that phone call, so please don't worry about that. You can also send me a letter at parentlesspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for taking the time to stop in. If you'd like to support the show and have access to exclusive content, please visit www.patreon.com/parentlesspodcast.
And that's what I meant, like, too, like, to clarify more with your listeners, too. Like, I'm not happy my grandparents passed away, okay? I'm not happy they passed away. I was devastated. But the thing is, like, looking back, hindsight's 20/20, they say. And I'm saying, like, looking back now, holy shit, that allowed my brain to be open to possibilities for shit. It allowed my brain to be open to the fact that, you know what? Now that they're not here anymore, what does that mean for me? How am I going to move on carrying on their memories or carrying on what I felt like they would have wanted me to do? And that's pretty much how I lived, is that I viewed it as, people would say all the time, you remind me so much of your grandpa, so many times.
He passed away when you were in Bible college. So
Yeah.
What year was that compared to when you came out last year?
That's, God, I'm pretty sure that was around when I was 20 or 21, around there. So I think when I was 20 or 21, and I just came out last year when I was 28. So about 7 or 8 years difference, roughly, just saying roughly, 7 or 8 years. I went from being a full-fledged youth pastor, which was what spurred me into the ministry even more. I spiraled even further into religious fanaticism after they passed, because I felt like I needed to carry on what my grandpa was doing as a Sunday school teacher. And I 100% dived in deep. I nestled in, dig my heels in, and I stayed in a church I probably shouldn't have stayed at. But because I was in there at the time of my grandparents' passing, I felt like I needed to fulfill obligation. And that's what I feel like I could actually probably trace it back to in a lot of ways, is probably their death. Is that in some ways I felt like eventually I was no longer obligated to be there. And I felt like I was free after I stopped letting my dead grandparents, and pretty much my dead people that raised me, my parents in a way, leave and leave my life and allow me to become that person for someone else. Like, allow me to be my own independent person and not lean on them for my interpretations anymore, but lean on myself and lean on my friends that have actually been there for me and who have supported me since coming out. That's the thing too. If I know retroactively my grandparents wouldn't have been for this shit, which I know they aren't, and they wouldn't be, then I have to make my own story then and make it much more interesting and a lot more gay than theirs was. And that's just my goal. To make light of it.
I talk about, coping skills. How do you cope with, the death of your people? And you just told me you spiraled deep down into religion for a little bit. So I'm sure that was a bit of a coping skill at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah. Tell me about this.
surprisingly, even though you would never think that the two would go together, they do. Religion and sex go very well together when you're spiraling out of control. And that's what I'm, the best way of putting it. It is like oh God, I've never done this, but I'm just using this as an example. It's the cocaine speedball of everything, of like the ultimate, just it'll knock you dead, is religion and sex mixed together. Money and religion, religion and sex, those things right there, all just, it's just get you all feeling good, because you get the satisfaction of carnality, of all the shit that you get to do to another person. And then you get the religious carnality of, I get to control all these other people too. Holy shit, is that a high? And that was the high I lived off of every single week when I would run youth group and, berate people about their lives here while I'm hooking up on Grindr over here. While people are doing this and saying this shit about LGBTQ people over here, I'm over here indulging in the same shit that I'm preaching against, because I felt like I'm untouchable. And I felt like grief and pain and heartache led me to that spiral out of control, to say the least.
Yeah. So now, we talked about that you have a podcast. So tell me where this podcast came from and why you're doing it and what you talk about.
Yeah, thank you. So my podcast, again, it's called Religion Recovery, and based on my fucked up brain that you've heard so far, you can imagine why I probably need to also still recover from this shit. And being a pastor and as a person that was a big perpetrator in it, in my opinion, based on, a lot of mind control that I went under, I felt like I needed to kind of debunk that shit in my own time. And that's one of the things that I'm doing. Like, it's pretty much a deconversion podcast on my journey through deconversion, which is still actively happening. And I felt like there's no better time than the present for people to see how crazy and fucked up my mind is than inviting them along with me. So I felt that would be a good outlet for me that's positive, that can help other people, that I'm not trying to make a shit ton of money off of, but I'm just trying to use it as an outlet for me and for other people to express their angst and their frustration and their experiences, good and bad, the positive and negative of religion and where it intersects with their life. And I felt like I started the podcast back a few months ago. And part of the reason why is that I felt that I couldn't just sit on this information or just angry Facebook or tweet about it, or just post this shit post about it. I felt like I needed something constructive. And the more and more I would study about religion, and I still actively do, you could see I'm a big audiobook listener, so I could show you all the, I have 13 badges from Audible, God damn it, and I'm proud of it. And a lot of that is based on religion books and psychology, and a lot of it has been, Eastern theologies and different things like that, and mysticism and spirituality and shamanism, all that interesting stuff that I was never allowed to kind of dive into and explore. I'm able to do that on my show, and I love that.
Do you have any tips and tricks for anyone who is experiencing the loss of their parents?
Very, very, that is a good loaded question. I would say first and foremost, refresh your brain on the process of grief in general, that there are going to be stages of you recovering from the shit. And that's one of the things I would really encourage you, if you have lost someone that you love, any advice that I can give you on it would be, one, try to find, in my opinion, some kind of ritual that helps you with remembering them in a positive way, but is not going to turn it into some unhealthy obsession. And that might be a way for you to kind of be able to have a process of you doing something, of writing down your feelings and then putting it together with, something else that you want to offer up or you want to burn. And I'm saying do it in a new moon ritual or some shit. And why I'm saying that specifically, I want to give shout out to my amazing friend Julie that has been on my show a few times. And I think you'd love talking to her sometime too. She is crazy story. She had a new moon ritual that she does, which is like you write down things that are important to you or things about a certain subject or a person that you want to see changed or that you want to kind of leave in the past. And you want to be able to grieve them fully, but you also want to be able to keep moving on with your life. And new moon rituals are one of those like shaman things that I'll give you an example, like to show you I'm an equal opportunity lover of spirituality and religion the same. There are definitely things that religion and spirituality can give you that will be able to help you process this shit more. One of them, I think, is that new moon ritual I'm talking about. That way, write down some stuff about your loved ones that you have appreciated or that they've taught you or lessons that you're going to carry on with you from their memory, and make it a thing where you honor them fully. Maybe that's one of the most helpful things is trying to find a new tradition that incorporates your loved one in it, but in a healthy way. And it might just be that you re-gift some of their stuff to someone else that needs it. And it might be a thing for you. Giving was one of the things that really helped me kind of get past this too. It was getting focused on helping other people that are in worse spots than I am. Especially after losing someone. If your parent or your loved one has been essential in influencing you in positive ways, then try to do something in their memory that's positive. That's how I look at it. If maybe it's something that is a subtle, nice reminder of that person, go plant a tree, go plant some flowers, do something like that will get you to physically do something to get out of this pandemic trap space that we're in, right? The boxiness, and allows us to kind of break free from that shit and allows us to go and do things tactically with our hands. And I feel like that's one of the things that we miss that religion was able to do so well. If it was through memorization, if it was through stained glass windows or whatever it is, there are pictures in our mind that are attached to memories and shit. And they're the standing, the sitting, the standing, the sitting, the physical activities associated with different things that we would do in church all the time, that I think we can hijack that shit and take it for ourselves and use it to help remember people better. That's my opinion. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but I think that's a good way of using religion to your advantage like that, and your faith to your advantage. Remember them in a positive way.
Yeah. So how do you remember your grandparents in a positive way?
One of the ways that I've done it is I've found a way to try to remember the good stories. So one of the ways that I keep my grandparents alive to me is through my storytelling. And I try to use my storytelling ability, though, in terms of my coming out story as a way of doing a callback to storytelling, but also as a way of saying, I'm still my own person and fuck what you think, because that's a way for me to keep moving on as a person myself. So by me telling more of my story, by me going on podcasts and doing other shit like that, and me just doing my podcast in general, I am daily, every time I do a podcast, it actively comes to mind that this is a storytelling ability that I got a lot from listening to the stories of my grandpa. And I feel like if there are people that connect with it in some ways or another, my grandparents are helping promote my shit in a way, because they are one of the biggest influences on how I talk and how I speak and how I communicate to people. So that's my way of doing it. I have like a couple things from them that don't have any negative association memories with them or anything like that I have with me. One of them is like an old watch that my grandpa gave me that has a diamond in it. And it's just like, it's even just like a small little thing. It isn't worth more than $100. But the thing is that for me, that was one of the first times that I was given something that nice. And for me, my grandpa gave it to me because he wanted me to look good on a communication topic that I was about to present when I was preaching. And for me, that was one of his favorite watches, and he gave it to me anyways. And I'm like, man, that's a generous thing that I don't have any negative memories with. I felt that at that time it reminded me of my grandpa, who's a gift giver, and that's what I am today. And I got nothing to feel ashamed about keeping it. It's one of those things that your brain will tell you in a lot of ways what you need and what you don't need. And for the things you don't know, That's why there's counseling and therapy and shit like that. And that's one of the things that I went to that's helped me tremendously is go to a therapist, go talk to people. Lexapro has helped me a ton too. If you don't know what that is, listen to some Kanye West lyrics and shit. It's it's pretty much like I think it was like an anti-inhibitor, something like that. I'm taking it and I don't even know, but it's pretty much for my brain to not get clogged up with all of the traumatic emotional shit that it normally does where I overthink it. And Lexapro helps me kind of unclog it like Drano for my brain. And for me, it's that feeling of me being able to not get parked on an issue. It allows me to move on in a reasonable amount of time. So if you have trouble with that, that's something that I would recommend going to. And Teladoc is a way you can do that. And I wish I was sponsored by them, but Teladoc is a way that I normally go and I meet with my therapist. So go and meet with your therapist too, like via Teladoc if you can't go in person during the pandemic. Like there are options out there for you. Like take advantage of them, in my opinion. That's my opinion. You know, why not?
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad that you brought that up about therapy and your medication that you're able to take. Do you have a form of therapy? So when you talk to your therapist, I don't know, give me like a quick synopsis of like a 1 minute and
Sure.
one therapy session in 1 minute. Like just tell me kind of what it's like.
Okay, got you. It's Tyler, why are you mostly parked on this issue? And what is kind of the root cause of the issue? And she normally breaks it down to, this is something that has probably happened to you in the past multiple times over and over again. It's traumatic shit that she will kind of go back and try to figure and kind of narrow down what is my real issue behind my issue. For me, I overthink fucking everything. And so for me, sometimes it's just simple shit where she's like, you know, we should probably just up your dosage. And that's what it is. And that fixed it one time. Like sometimes that's what it is, where I'm doing everything right. I'm processing it, but it's not carrying me through the whole day. Maybe through meditation and other things like that, or different suggestions that she's given me, that's usually one of the things that we talk about is like, how are you being more mindful? And the mindfulness, it's weird because I've never noticed how much doctors do talk about that shit until the last few years. Is it mindfulness and meditation are game changers, and your doctor knows that. And that's one of the things too. If you have a good doctor that's not just trying to up your medication, but is also talking to you about your mindfulness and your meditation, that's a good MD, in my opinion. And that's who you need to talk to. And that's my opinion of it.
Yeah, there are definitely doctors who we know try to just overprescribe for anything. So definitely important. There might be somebody out there who needs to know that. I have another question. Is there like a phrase or a word or a favorite joke or something?
Okay, ironically enough, my grandpa's favorite joke, it's so weird you brought that up. My partner and I were driving, and every time we go like out of state or whatever, which hasn't been recently, of course, but last year, before the pandemic, this is like February I'm talking about, we went on our first out-of-state trip to San Diego. And we were going to do it again this year as kind of a tradition thing. But unfortunately, we have a worldwide pandemic. So next year, hopefully. We went and we were driving along and we passed by these gigantic bales of hay. Okay. And every time, I shit you not, every time we'd pass by it, my grandpa would say this joke exactly. Said, do you know what a gay horse says? Hey, right? Just like it would be the gayest voice ever. Just like, what does a gay horse say? Hey, that kind of shit, right? Like that was his favorite joke, and I'm like, little did he know, me in the back seat the whole time, is that your favorite grandson. You know, holy shit.
You should have just been like, what does your gay grandson say? One of those times.
That's what I should have said to him. That would have been the best answer for your question earlier. God damn it, I missed it. That was a perfect opportunity. That was perfect. Full circle right there. I love that. That was great. That was great.
With that, is there anything that your grandma would say, or just a certain phrase? Like I know some people have just words that they say.
Okay. I can think of one for my grandpa more, but my grandpa would say stuff like "doggone it all," which was like the best Christian cuss word that I still like to say. Is that if I can't say "damn it," I just in my brain it will automatically go to "doggone it all," and that's the tone too. Is the "doggone it all" anyways, pal? That's the shit. My grandma would be more. I'm trying to think of like an expression she would say, but it would mostly just be it would mostly be her looks more than it would be what she said. It would mostly just be this. It would be like, and pretty much be like, "Really, Bruce?" And that pretty much probably be the best phrase. My grandpa's name was Bruce. Bruce and Lois, of course. Bruce and Lois Montgomery, and I'm sure it would pretty much be her phrase would be that if she would ever get a tattoo in her life, which she didn't, very good Christian lady, she would probably get like, "Oh, Bruce, really?" that which is probably ironically going to be the exact same phrase that my partner will probably use with me is, "Tyler, really?" So I feel like it's poetic in its own way.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you brought up their names. I wasn't sure if you would want to share their names or not.
Yeah,
but Bruce and Lois, I do like to talk about the names because that's important as well. So is there anything else about Bruce and Lois or just anything in general that we haven't talked about that you want to bring up?
Other than, the famous candlestick feud, which I could give your audience for some lore really quick. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, tell me, how can we reach you on Instagram or wherever else you're at if you're on Facebook or anything?
Absolutely. If you get a chance, follow us on Instagram on our page, which is Religion Recover. I couldn't get Religion Recovery. I tried, but Religion Recover was the closest I could get, and that's RELIGION, and that's RECOVER. And you can also find me on Instagram directly. My name is a little bit more difficult. It's Tyler. It's TYLOR, and then S as in Scott. My last name, Montgomery, MONTGOMERY. Like I say this for work all of the time. You can follow me there. You can also send me a friend request on Facebook if you could find me. Good luck. Other than that, check out our webpage too, because that's how you can get connected to see all the episodes and shit. And we work with Back Home Media, which of course, Steph and her wonderful husband deal with us as well. So you could find out more information on their shit too, on Back Home Media's sites and stuff that we're related to. You can check out religionrecovery.com and just spelt normally, religionrecovery.com. Follow us, and subscribe or whatever on iTunes and Spotify. Just get the latest episodes and shit. I would love to, if any of your audience members or whatever too, if you guys have any questions that you want answered on religion too, please feel free, drop me a line if there was something that resonated with you, that you think is a good thing to discuss or a topic. I need ideas and I love ideas. So please feel free, reach out anytime to me. I don't mind. And it was a privilege coming on here. I've been hearing so much about you that from your husband, I've been waiting to come see your show. So this is awesome and I'm happy to do it. And thank you for the opportunity again.
Thank you so much, Tyler. And thanks for stopping in.
Thanks again, guys.
Hey there. Thanks for sticking with me to the very end. This is a special portion of the show that I am so excited to be able to include. Here's a great big thank you to the new Patreon members at patreon.com/parentlesspodcast. Antonia A., Grace C., and Ann S. Thank you all so much for your support of Parentless Podcast. You are very much appreciated. Parentless Podcast is recorded in Phoenix, Arizona. Find us on social media and most major podcast platforms. Music recorded by Colin the Coco and the Revolving Birds. Studio and editing provided by Back Home Media. I am your host, Stephanie Relaford.